Welcome back to the Food for Therapy podcast. I'm your host, Therese, and welcome to this episode about when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. That is the truth, because everything starts with us and everything starts with our healing. As I've said before in many of my other podcasts, that the trauma we experience as children is not our fault, but our health and our healing and our mental health and wellness is our accountability. It's up to us to ensure that we heal. We can't ask for someone to come into our lives and heal us, because what will happen is that person will just expose our vulnerabilities, expose our triggers, expose our trauma. So the work starts with us, and it starts with you acknowledging that you need help. And that is actually a strength. It's not a weakness to acknowledge that you need help. And I remember being at the precipice of just wanting to take my own life, quite simply, because my mother had died. I had grown up in a home with domestic violence and abuse. My father had psychiatric illness. My mother's mantra over and over again was, my only way out of this marriage is through death. And over she repeated that mantra, and she got her wish, dying at the age of 43. And so began the most profound relationship I would ever have, and that's the one with myself. That relationship occurred because I was experiencing pathological grief. That relationship with myself occurred because I was depressed. That relationship occurred because I was experiencing severe agoraphobia. I couldn't leave the house, and severe anxiety, and on and on and on. And I was fortunate enough to connect with an amazing psychoanalyst, and so began the healing process. And yes, it did take a long time, because nothing worth having comes easy. It was 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And I had to experience more challenges in my therapy, because the defense mechanisms that I had built up growing in that home environment had to be deconstructed. The narratives that I had told myself about the experiences in my home environment had to be deconstructed. The grief I was experiencing had to be deconstructed and processed. And grief is a very, very natural thing that happens when we lose someone to death, when we end a relationship, when we lose an animal. We have to deconstruct that relationship in order for us to be able to move through that and become healthy and whole, in order to be able to integrate that into our psyche. And so the more that I progressed through my analysis, the more I started to like myself, the more I started to go out in the world and meet new people, because the old ones could see that I was changing and we were no longer aligned. And that's okay, because the people that will come into your life will mirror you, because everything in life is a mirror, and we attract the sum of our vibration. And then you'll be fortunate enough to open up to a whole world. A whole world started opening up to me. I went from being such a polarized black and white thinker, from being incredibly aggressive, to starting to see the world with color, hues of different color, to starting to integrate all that sadness, all that trauma, and make sense of it in a way that helped me to heal and reconcile that my mother wasn't perfect, my father wasn't perfect. They had their faults, but they did the best they could with what they had, okay? And I'm not saying here advocating that, anything to do with domestic violence. I'm a huge supporter of protecting women and children in those scenarios. What I'm saying is that you can't look at a problem and villainize one person without asking, why does it occur? Why does domestic violence occur? I had to ask myself that question. And in my culture, in the Egyptian culture, patriarchy is heavily entrenched in this culture, where men are not allowed to show weakness. Men are not allowed to cry. My father grew up in in Egypt where he had his own trauma and he had never admitted to having this trauma or needing to get help. So he was a symptomatic human being walking around with all this unhealed baggage, projecting it onto my mother, and my mother would project it onto him, and then they would project it onto us. And they both did the best they could, and my mother did what she could. But she was also a person of her time, where marriage was the most important value in society. Society upheld the nuclear family. Society, more than anything, would encourage people to stay together. There wasn't a lot of information about domestic violence in the 70s, and every time she left, she would be encouraged by the Coptic Church to go back because she chose my father. And that was her choice. Reconciling that both of them had agency and they both made the decision to stay together, that's their choice. But now we have a choice. We have a choice in how we deal with our trauma. It is incumbent on you to do the research and figure out what the right therapist is for you. If you have experienced sexual abuse, domestic violence, rape, any of those really traumatic things in childhood, I highly encourage you to seek out psychoanalysis or a psychodynamic therapy. Do your research, ask around. The chances are, if your friends have had a good therapy, they will know of someone because you have similar values. Don't have high expectations when you first go into therapy. Ask yourself what it is that you want. When I first entered therapy, it really was just about surviving, keeping me alive, because all I wanted to do was die. I had a codependency with my mother, and that's why I was experiencing pathological grief. I could not accept her death. And after having pathological grief and reading, I'm such a voracious reader. One of my favorite writers is Joan Didion. I read that she had pathological grief when her husband had died. So I realized it was more common than I had imagined. And the more that we talk about our experiences, the more we feel safe to talk about them, the more we can build a community where people don't feel shame and feel isolated by the trauma they're experiencing. We want to normalize having mental challenges. I won't even call it mental illness because it was a challenge, and it was a challenge related to specific events that helped me move through them. And it was challenging. It was initially very challenging because the more I progressed in my therapy, the worse it got. But the only way to move through it is to go through it. So you have to keep taking steps forward. And then as I progressed through it, the intuition that I had as a child started to resurface, and I began to trust it, and I started to cultivate it. You know, the voracious curiosity that I had as a child that had been dumbed down into me. I'd been told that it was wrong to be curious. I'd been told that as a girl it was not right to ask questions. Anything related to sex or sexuality or anything about existential questioning I had as a child. If a God loves us, why would a God that loves us create one religion to be superior to another? Why? Because my understanding of love is that it's all-encompassing. Regardless of what religion or what beliefs we come from, I believe in a higher power, and that higher power loves us all unconditionally. And it dismantled religion for me. When I let go of religion through my analysis and I began to read more and understand more, every religion, I read about every religion, and every religion for me had the basic tenet, which was love, which was forgiveness, which was the more that we learn to forgive, the more we're able to heal. And when I say forgiveness, I mean in earnest and with a humble heart. I forgave my father for what he did. I forgave my mother for what she did. I accepted that they were human beings and did the best they could. They immigrated from Egypt and came to a country and had to learn a new language and had to assimilate and had to go out into the workforce. And my mother worked like a Trojan to take care of us. You know, she took care of my father as well. And I don't know if I could do the same that my mother did. She was extraordinary. But she also made mistakes because she was human. And in recognizing their fallibility and their mistakes, I was kinder to myself. I recognized that I was okay to make mistakes. I wasn't perfect. I was allowed to make mistakes. I wasn't so harsh on myself. And the less harsh I was on myself, the less critical I was on other people. The more I moved from being judgmental and began to embrace compassion and kindness in a very integral way, in a very honest way. It wasn't just a caption on a social media, be kind. It was the way that I began to see the world. And when I began to see the world in that way, I began to show compassion and kindness to people in general, you know. And the more work I did on myself, the more compassion I had for others, and the more compassion people had for me. The more I began to dismantle this whole, when you grow up with someone that's a perfectionist, and it's your mother or your father. My mother was a perfectionist because that was the way that she maintained control. My mother was a perfectionist because her mother was harshly criticizing and criticized her often, and that's all she knew. And so she did the same to me and to my brother. And when I began to dismantle that, when I had my own kids, I realized that it wasn't going to serve them or me in any way. I began to be softer with them, and your edges start to soften, and you start to see the flow of life, and you start to look with wonder at everything you see. You start to be more present. The ability to be present is a gift. That's why it's called presence, because that means you're living in the eternal moment. And I started to meditate, and the more I meditated, the more questions I had, the more answers I got through my meditation, through my living. And I was so fortunate enough to experience the holy instant. And the holy instant was the most beautiful, profound experience I have ever had in my life. And that experience was an instant where I recognized that I was connected to everything that existed, to nature, to trees, to other human beings, to animals, to every constellation. Everything was connected to me, and I was one with everything. And there was no past, there was no future, there were no problems. I was in the eternal present, and it was the most profound, beautiful experience I had ever had. You see, because the universe conspires to give you what you want. When you are clear about what you want, you will manifest it. The more you heal, the more you're able to live in alignment with the universe. The more you heal, the more clearer you are in your psyche and your consciousness, and you're able to show up with integrity, with honesty and boundaries. They are integral to your health and your wellness. The more I healed, the more self-respect I had, the more love I had, the clearer boundaries I set. And again, people started to drop off, but new people came into my life. Ones who had boundaries, who had self-respect, who challenged me with respect. And the more I grew and embraced life, and I would look with wonder and awe like a child, and I began to believe and have a faith. I let go of organized religion, and I found a faith in a universal order. And the more I believed, the more I received. And the more I received, the more gracious I was. The more gracious I was, and I would be grateful and thankful. And I started to cultivate the practice of gratitude every morning when I open my eyes. Thank you, universe, for another day. Thank you for my life. Thank you for the ability to be able to see the world with such clarity. Thank you for my curiosity, for my intuition. Thank you for helping me and nurturing me and helping me to be in alignment. Thank you for my beautiful children, their health and their happiness, and my husband, my riding, my friends. Thank you for all experiences. And I began to realize nothing was good or bad, it just was. And when you start to see things in that context, the whole universe opens up for you, because you are a part of the universe. You are. The constellations you see in the world and the way you see the world with wonder and awe is a part of you. You are a part of everything. And that, my friends, is the most extraordinary thing you'll come to experience, is you will come to love yourself so much. You won't look to alcohol or drugs or sex or people to fulfill you, because you are fulfilled. You've come into the world that way and you've found yourself again. And what a joy that is. What a joy that is. To be able to feel like you don't need anything. You don't need anything. The whole world has been conditioned to believe that capitalism and buying the biggest home and buying the biggest car and having the right bag on your arm or the right shoes is going to make you a better human being. It's fodder. It's nonsense. And capitalism wants you to believe that. You're hypnotized by the stupor of capitalism, because that's how capitalism keeps growing, right? But when you start to see yourself, you don't need that. If you need a bag and shoes to make you feel good about yourself, my friend, you need more help. You need therapy, okay? This is why people shop a lot and become addicted to shopping, because it gives them a natural high, right? They're substituting. Something is missing internally. They're substituting substances, right? People are not supposed to be used. You've heard this before, okay? Products are supposed to be used. People are supposed to be treated with respect. The way you treat people is the way you should want to be treated, okay? And everything is connected. And every experience that you put out in the universe, the energy of the universe will match it for you. So the more work you do on yourself, the more compassion you have for yourself, the more compassion you'll have for others. The more love you have for yourself, the more love you'll have for others. The more peace you have, the more peaceful you will be with others. You know, that dismantling of the ego means you're no longer identified with your body. You recognize that we are all connected and everything is energy. And then the universe starts to conspire in your favor in the most magical ways. And this, my friend, is the way that we heal the world. The world is in chaos. These wars that are happening between Palestine and Israel and Iran and Russia and Ukraine are no different to the wars we had 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And what has humanity learned? We have to evolve. For the future generations, we have to pay it forward for them. We have to learn, and the only way to do that is to work on ourselves. Don't think of yourself as small. You are not small. You have the entire universe within you. The more work you start to do on yourself, the entire universe will start to appear to you and through you. And it is incumbent on you. Your trauma is not your fault, my friend, but your healing, your health, and your wellness is your accountability. It's up to you to do the work. And I'm not saying you need to take the same trajectory as me through psychoanalysis. I'm saying do your research. Find the right therapist for what you're dealing with. Do the work on yourself. Be curious about yourself. The more you're curious about yourself, the more curious you'll be about other people. And the more you'll have to be curious about and grateful for. The more that you're grateful, the universe will give you more to be grateful for. You know, the more you do work on yourself, the better you will feel about yourself. Nobody, my friend, is going to come and fix you. Nobody. Even if you're having the most amazing partner in your life, what they will do is highlight your vulnerabilities, highlight your triggers, highlight your trauma. So you need to do the work on yourself. Invest in yourself. Put the money into yourself that you put into someone else. Put the money into yourself that you would into buying a new car or a new pair of shoes. Put it into yourself so that you can start feeling good about yourself. The more work you put into yourself, the better you'll feel. Because when we heal ourselves, we truly can heal the world. For more on my work, you know what to do. If you're looking to book a session with me, you know where to go. I'm Marie-Therese Bolden. As always, I wish you a life of peace, one of purpose and prosperity. Bye for now.